Hi, my name is Alex McGowin, and welcome to Talking Expat Taxes, where we dive into the financial pitfalls and tips and tricks that expats can have when moving abroad or moving outside of your home country. Ultimately, the goal is to give you information so we can help you make better financial decisions as an expat. I'm really excited about our guest today. His name is Rick Philps. He lives in Costa Rica, and he's a specialist in Costa Rican immigration, specifically for U.S. and people and Canadian people, but for Costa Rican rules in particular. This is a great topic for me. I mean, I deal with a lot and I talk to a lot of U.S. people that live in Costa Rica, are moving there, or maybe they're just investing there from a real estate perspective. And I deal with the tax side of that, but obviously nothing's looked at in a vacuum, or at least it shouldn't be. And a lot of questions I get are around immigration. How do I get permanent residency? Maybe they're looking for a second citizenship through a Costa Rica route or being in Costa Rica. So I'm really excited to get the scoop on some of that from Rick, and he's going to have a lot of good information for us. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, just a quick plug. My firm is McGowin Tax LLC, and what we do is help individuals and small businesses with international tax planning and compliance. So if you need to reach out to me, or if I can help with anything, you can visit us on our website at McGowinTax.com or at my email, which is alex.mcgowin@mcgowintax.com. Hey, Rick, how's it going?
Hey, good morning, Alex. Doing fine.
Yeah, great.
How are
Thanks
things?
for appreciate you coming on today to talk a little bit about immigration in Costa Rica. Already kind of mentioned this is a big part of my practice, at least with U.S. people investing in Costa Rica, moving to Costa Rica. But I kind of get trapped in the vacuum sometimes of just looking at the U.S. tax piece when there's a lot more to consider, and one of those is the immigration side. So it's great to have you on to kind of summarize some of those rules for us, and maybe we can break it down into some of the specific fact patterns that we both see. But before we get into that, maybe if you could just give a little bit more depth into your background, what got you to Costa Rica, where are you in Costa Rica, and yeah, what you specialize in, what your firm does.
Yes, be glad to, Alex. I am a practicing attorney in Costa Rica, specializing in real estate and immigration law. Particularly, all of my clients tend to be people immigrating to Costa Rica from the U.S. and Canada in particular, some Western European countries as well. I'm originally from Canada myself. I practiced law in Victoria, British Columbia for 14 years before moving to Costa Rica in 1998. I had to return to university to obtain a Costa Rica law degree in civil law, which is the legal system used throughout Latin America. And I practiced law here for the last 21 years. Most of that time I did spend in a western suburb of San Jose. However, the last 5 years I've been on the northwest Pacific coast, Costa Rica, near the town of Brasilito, which is between two major beach towns of Chamarindo and Flamingo.
Yeah, very cool. And I was recently in Brasilito earlier this year, and I actually didn't know until I spent a little more time there how many Canadians are actually in Costa Rica. But yeah, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans in that area, and obviously Costa Ricans. Um,
Yeah, yes, immigration has really taken off since the end of the pandemic. I think a lot of people discovered that it was possible to work remotely in many cases. And after the pandemic was over and freedom to travel was again allowed, uh, they started looking for places they could carry on their business activities in a more relaxed atmosphere, in a comfortable social setting as well. And Costa Rica, in many respects, fits that description 100%. And
yeah, definitely.
accordingly, Costa Rica has uh, absolutely boomed with immigration since the end of the pandemic. And in particular, the area where I am now, and part of the reason that I relocated from San Jose to the Northwest Pacific Coast is exactly because of that immigration influx. And
Yeah,
building boom that's been associated. And it, of course, dovetails very closely with my practice being in real estate law and immigration law.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I saw the same thing with my practice. I mean, mainly dealing with it. I mean, doing international tax, but mainly dealing with expats. You know, 10 years ago, it was the expat world was really one of two people. It was, well, a few, but retirees and then intercompany workers. So you didn't see as many expats in countries like Costa Rica. It'd be more like the UK or Australia, moving between companies on their intercompany visas. Or you have the backpacker type person, where the surfer bum. But now, like you said, there's a lot more of ability to move to somewhere like Costa Rica for all the cultural and lifestyle benefits and keep your day job, and so I'm seeing that a lot more as well. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's very much what's developed. Exactly that. Of
yeah,
course, with the immigration influx, there's also a huge building boom going on. Again, particularly in the part of Costa Rica where I am,
right. And that's Guanacaste is the province.
Guanacaste province. Yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
I got you.
And as a result, of course, this made sense for me to be located closer to where the majority of people who would most likely be my clients would be settling in Costa Rica.
Right. It turns out to be a pretty nice place to live at the same time.
I would say
So
so.
yeah, yeah. So I guess let's jump into the immigration side of things. I mean, you know, I guess a lot, like we talked about, a lot of people moving down there are not necessarily going to work for a Costa Rican company or moving from an employment standpoint. So they're looking for an ability to, at least in my client's case, usually move down there to continue working for a self-employed business, or maybe they're investing in real estate with the goal of becoming a permanent resident or even a citizen of Costa Rica. So maybe if we could kind of jump into the different ways you can get residency as a foreigner in Costa Rica, and yeah, what options are
Yes.
available.
Yes, there's two broad categories of residency, temporary residency and permanent residency. All foreigners moving to Costa Rica initially, except for some very unusual circumstances, will apply under the temporary residency application requirements to begin with. And that residency category is divided into three subcategories based on differing financial components to each. And they're the pensionado temporary residency category, which is based on pension income of a minimum of $1,000 per month for life by the
Yeah.
applicant. There's the rentista category, which is investment income of at least $2,500 per month for a 2-year period. And there's the investor or inversionista category, which requires either a property or a business interest purchase of at least $150,000 US in value to qualify. Those are the three basic subcategories of temporary residency.
Okay,
Uh,
so I guess if we focus on one real quick, with the you call it the pensionado, right? So that's the pension visa.
yes,
Because I see that a lot, where a retiree or somebody collecting in the U.S., at least collecting Social Security or starting to draw from their U.S. pensions. Um, that's the kind of person that could move down to Costa Rica and use that pension income as documentation for, you said, $1,000 a month of pension income. It doesn't matter that it's coming from a U.S. pension. It's just that you have to be able to document basically $12,000 a year from the pension.
yes, that's correct. It must be a pension for life. There's
Okay.
various ways to document that. If it's coming from Social Security, there's a pension letter that you can get from the Social Security Directorate in the United States that will suffice. It needs to have the apostille seal applied by the Federal State Department. and then it's ready to go for use in Costa Rica, assuming it meets the minimum income amount. It was from a private pension source, again, 1,000 a month for life, and it must be on a signed letterhead from the pension source that's notarized, and again, it would have to be apostolized, but in this case, it would be apostolized by the Office of the Secretary of State in the state where the pension source is located.
Okay. So you would get it from the source that's paying, like documentation comes from the source that's paying the pension. You couldn't, for example, if it's going into a bank account, can you document with bank account statements for the pensionado, or you really need the pension documentation? Because I
No,
guess the bank account just shows income. It doesn't show that it's from a pension. I guess that's the
yes, no, you do have to have the actual documentation from the pension source, be it
right.
Social Security or a private company source. That has to be the actual documentation for the pensionado uh, residency
Okay.
application.
Gotcha. And so with all these, and we can dig into the other two a little more as well, but with all three you mentioned, they're temporary visas, right? Is there any difference? I guess what does that mean to be on a temporary visa? Like how often does it renew? And do you have to leave the country at any point for the renewal? And then I guess is there a difference between the three as far as what you're allowed to do in the country and the time period of the temporary visa?
Oh, the temporary residency application, once it's been submitted to the immigration department, you will not have to leave Costa Rica again to renew your tourist visa.
Okay.
Uh, Recently, there's been a change for foreign driver's license privileges to be consistent with the time of the tourist visa that's granted. So if you're being 180 days in most cases, uh, if you are able to get your residency application processed within the 180 days, you won't have to leave again to renew your foreign driver's license privileges. But if you don't, that would be the only reason to leave if you required foreign driver's
Okay.
license privileges to continue. Um,
Gotcha.
as far as the actual time for the temporary residency after it's granted, you do have to renew at the 2 year point just for a new residency card, new photograph, update your contact particulars basically in Costa Rica. However, at the 3 year point, you're entitled to change to permanent residency status. And the difference between the temporary residency and permanent residency are significant because under the temporary residency category, you cannot work for wages, a salary, or a commission income during the 3 year period.
Is that,
And
and a quick
permanent
question
resident,
on that, is that just for Costa Rican salaries? Or what if you're employed by a Canadian or a US company living in Costa Rica under the temporary residency? Is that still a problem or
the
is it okay because it's a foreign company?
legally, if you're going to be working for a foreign company, you need to apply for what's called a nomad visa.
Okay.
There are many people in Costa Rica that do exactly what you've just described. That is, work for a foreign company that caters to foreign clients, only pays the wages of the person in Costa Rica to a foreign bank account, and the person in Costa Rica merely imports the necessary funds to carry on living in Costa Rica. That is not strictly legal, but the bottom line is it's also uh, not easily discoverable because
I
it's
see.
all
So there's kind of
internet
like there's the
based.
technical rule and
It's
then
a
what
technical
people
rule,
do.
but I can tell you there are many, many people in Costa Rica doing exactly that.
Okay.
Technically speaking, if you're going to be working for a foreign company, internet based, you have to apply for what's called a nomad visa, which caters to exactly that type of person. The problem with the nomad visa is it doesn't lead to residency. It's a totally different
Uh,
category and it's a maximum of 2 years. So if you plan to live in Costa Rica, you really have to tailor your application towards an actual temporary residency application, because otherwise the nomad visa will expire in 2 years and you'll have to leave the country. So,
I
depending
see.
what your long-term plans are, the nomad visa may work for you if you're only looking at a brief interlude in Costa Rica. You have to show income to go with the nomad visa of a minimum of $3,000 US per month for a single person, or $4,000 a month for a family. So those are the basic requirements for a nomad visa. But again, if your long-term plans are to live in Costa Rica on an ongoing basis, residency is really your only option.
I got you.
Technically, you won't be able to work for wages in salary or a commission income during that 3 year period until you're qualified to apply for permanent status, permanent residency status. The other good thing about permanent residency status is that there's no financial component associated with it. So at that point, you no longer have to show that you're in fact getting pension income or
Mm,
have suitable investment income or own a property or business interest in Costa Rica. Those are the two main differences
right.
between temporary and permanent residency.
Understood. Okay. So yeah, if you're employed by a US company and you're looking to move to Costa Rica, technically you'd need the nomad visa, but that's not going to solve your residency problems because it's going to expire in 2 years. So really the route to go in that case is one of the, if you're not a pensioner, then the rentista or the inversionado. Did I say that right? Inversionado? Uh,
Yes,
the,
but
the investor visa. So one of
yes,
those
but
two.
the same rules apply as far as not working
Right.
for a salary in either of the three temporary residency categories. So the
So
only
technically that
the
could be
only
a
thing
problem.
the, the only legal way to derive an income in Costa Rica during that 3 year period prior to applying for permanent residency is to own and manage your own business that
Hmm.
employs either Costa Rican citizens or permanent residents to do the actual work of the business, whatever that might be. For an example, if you owned a restaurant bar business, you could hire waiters, a cashier, uh, cooks, etc., that would have to be Costa Rica citizens or foreigners with permanent residency status. But you, the owner, would not be able to partake in any of those duties, but you could be the manager, setting the duty roster for employees, ordering the actual supplies for the restaurant, that kind of a thing. But you wouldn't be able to partake in what would be considered the employee type work of the business.
I understand. Okay. All right. So what about the other two types? If you're not a pensioner, so I mean you have the rentista and then the investor visas. What are the requirements for each of those?
Yes, under the rentista status, the requirement is to show an investment income of $2,500 a month for a minimum of 2 years. The easiest way to meet that requirement is to place $60,000 US in a Costa Rica bank account, and the bank will write the necessary letter that you require for the rentista application.
Oh,
60,000,
interesting.
of course, equaling $2,500 a month for two
So you
years.
so you don't have to show like the pensionado, you had to show $1,000 a month of pension income, whereas the rentista, as long as you show 2 years worth of $2,500, so $60,000 of an investment, you don't have to show $2,500 a month of a particular type of income. You can just make the investment and that's it. Is that right?
Yes, yes, that's correct. The most efficient way to do it is to do it with the deposit to the Costa Rica bank.
Right.
There's specific wording that's required in the letter that all the Costa Rica banks are very familiar with and have no problem signing the applicable letter once the deposit is made. So some people may not feel particularly comfortable with putting that amount of money in a Costa Rica bank. There are possible options to do it with a foreign institution. The problem there is that most foreign institutions don't want to sign the letter that's required by the Costa Rica Immigration Department because it requires certain obligations should the depositor decide to retire any of those deposit monies prematurely, as far as giving notice to the Immigration Department. And most foreign financial entities don't want to get into that position.
Right. And so do you have to keep that $60,000 balance in there for the 2 years? Is that
Actually, no. When your resolution comes from the Immigration Department granting your residency, depreciating the 60,000 by $2,500 a month is actually what is required.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
You can merely deposit it to a separate account or use it for living expenses, but you have to show that you're actually depreciating that 60,000. The catch is at the 2-year renewal point, you have to show another $60,000 on deposit with the bank and get another letter from the bank to renew your residency at the 2-year point.
Interesting. Okay, so you can't just leave that 60,000 in there for 2 years. You have to be pulling 2,500 out a month and put in another 60,000 at the end of the 2-year mark.
That's right. You can either spend.
And you could transfer it, I guess, and then put the same money back in.
Exactly right. You can just put it into a separate bank account if that's the way you want to do it, or spend it, but knowing full well that at the end of the 2 years, you're going to have another 60,000 to renew your residency under that category.
The permanent residency doesn't kick in until year 3.
Year 3, and it takes probably 4 to 5 months to make the status change. But before your next 2-year renewal is required, you should have permanent residency. In other words, you should only have to renew once and have that requirement of redepositing $60,000. But by the time it would come around for your second renewal at 4 years, it would be
you'd be a permanent resident.
You wouldn't have to meet that requirement anymore with permanent residency.
I got you. Interesting. Yeah. So basically, you'd be if your goal is permanent residency through the rentista route, then you're going to have to make two $60,000 investments at the end of the day. There's really no way around that.
Yes, either, as you say, just transfer the 2,500 a month each month into a separate account and use that same 60,000 at the 2-year point, or come up with another source of 60,000 at the 2-year point.
Could you alternatively show 2,500 in income every month? I mean, let's say you're self-employed and you move to Costa Rica. Could you just show 25, or you have to make the initial 60,000 investment?
You can't do it on the basis of merely income. Or, it would have to be from a guaranteed deposit, which would probably be in the range of 600 to 700,000 US to produce that kind of a investment income on a monthly basis. If you showed that in either a Costa Rica or a foreign institution, that you had that type of a locked-in investment that would guarantee 2,500 a month from investment income, true investment income, then yes, that would be possible. But it's not a lot of people have that kind of investment hanging around.
Right? No, I wouldn't think so. But so that makes sense. So most of the people I'm dealing with, and as you mentioned before, I mean, the boom in Costa Rica has really been on the real estate side, at least especially in the Guanacaste area where you are. So, I mean, so a lot of times when people are moving down there looking to get residency, it's through a real estate investment. So how does that tie into this last type of pension? I mean, not pension, visa requirement.
The investor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the investor, or inversionista, as it's called in Spanish, that status requires a $150,000 U.S. property or business interest purchase. Most people, it's the property purchase that they qualify with. The important thing to know, if you're looking for a bargain property that just meets the requirements, is that $150,000 value has to be the property tax assessment value in the municipality where the property is located, not necessarily the cash purchase price of the property.
Okay.
So
Do you
because
see a big discrepancy there sometimes between the
there
two?
can be quite a discrepancy.
Yeah.
Quite often, the municipal property tax assessment is significantly lower than the
Right.
cash purchase price. So part of the application process for the inversionista status temporary residency is a certification by the municipality of the value of the property based on that property tax assessment value. That is one of the
Interesting.
documents that has to be submitted. So that's an
So if you
important
put
date.
in, so if you make a down payment, you put in $150,000 cash US dollar, but the value of that property on the Costa Rican real estate document is 100,000 US dollars equivalent, then even though there is $150,000 you put in, that's not going to pass the test because your
That's correct.
investment is only equal to the value that the property tax assessment comes up
That,
to.
it's all based on the municipality's property tax assessment value,
Okay.
not the cash value you put in. That's really what you have to be aware of.
Right.
Now,
Interesting.
now the property, the assessment value, you're required as the owner of a property to declare the current supposedly fair market value of the property once every 5 years.
Mm.
So,
So it could change.
depending on what time frame the last declaration was made in, it may be possible merely for, say, the seller of such a property to declare a new uh, property tax assessment value of 150,000 for that same property that's
Hmm.
currently valued at 100 because possibly it has appreciated that amount over the 5 year period, and in many cases that would probably be the case.
Gotcha. Okay, so in that case, let's say we get over that hurdle, the 150,000. You're a U.S. investor, and you want to purchase a rental property in Costa Rica. You can, and it's the same rule where you have it's a 2 year temporary residency, and then you're allowed to apply for. I'm sorry, a 3 year temporary residency, and then you can apply for permanent residency. Is that right?
Yes, all of the temporary residency categories carry a minimum 3 year period.
Okay. And
And
so,
then
and you can whether you live in Costa Rica or not. So let's say you stay in the United States, but you've met the $150,000 requirement for the temporary residency visa in Costa Rica. Can you still apply for permanent residency and move to Costa Rica at the end of that 3 years and apply for permanent residency? Or would you have had to have been in Costa Rica? You understand my question?
yes, yes, I understand it perfectly. It's the only requirement for you to be physically in Costa Rica would be when you renewed your temporary residency at the 2 year point. So you have to be present in Costa Rica to attend the appointment at immigration to do the renewal. Other than
Right.
that, your residency is valid even if you're living in the United States. At the three
Okay.
year point, it can be changed to the permanent residency status, and the same rules apply. You only have to be in Costa Rica on the actual renewal dates, physically speaking.
Interesting. Okay. And the reason I ask is, I mean, I have a lot of clients that, let's say, they have kids that are in high school in the United States, but they love Costa Rica and they want to move down there at some point. They can go ahead and start the residency application process, you know, the permanent, I guess, start the clock ticking on permanent residency application now by investing in Costa Rica. And so they can hit that 3 year mark, and maybe they move in 4 years to Costa Rica, and they will already be considered permanent residents. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yes, there's one important factor that would have to be considered in that scenario, and that is one of the requirements for residency in Costa Rica is that you join and pay into the social medical insurance program of the government. which
That's
also
temporary or permanent. You're paying into that.
temporary or permanent, you must be a member and pay in monthly to that. And that can be a significant amount uh, of based on your income. In the case of say rentista, which is fixed at 2,500, you could be looking easily at around $400 to $500 a month in a government medical insurance payment during all of that residency period when you were living in the United States. In other
Oh,
words,
wow.
the fact that you're living in the United States doesn't change that requirement, and they've included a portion of that payment that also contributes to the Costa Rica pension fund, which you as a foreigner will probably never be able to avail yourself of, but it's all part of that $400 to $500 a month
I
payment that
see.
you will have to keep current in order to keep your residency current. So it does come with a bit of a price tag, but the scenario of becoming a permanent residency is certainly attainable when you, even though you're spending predominantly in your daily life in the United States.
I got you. So that Social Security tax, it's about 20% of your Costa Rican income. Is that because you said
It, it,
250?
it could be it varies according to your income for the pensionado and the inversionista status. Uh,
Okay.
Rentista, obviously, it's
The
fixed at the
2,500.
2,500 plus the
Okay.
pension amount. It works out to about pensionado or the rentista status, I should say, works out to approximately 14%
Okay.
of that amount.
So what about the minimum pensionado? Like if you're earning $1,000 a month pension, I guess you wouldn't do that because you'd be living there in that scenario.
Well,
Um,
yes, in your when you apply for the medical insurance, of course, you have to produce certain documentation showing monthly bank account statements, recent tax return, that sort of thing. So it's going to be based on that, and it could
right.
generally be around that 12, 14% of your of whatever that monthly income amount is
I see.
payable to the government.
And what about so in the investor visa though, if you're just investing in a property and let's say you don't rent it out and it's just a second home and and you're staying in the US and all your income is earned in the US, then technically is there any income that's subject to that social security tax? Or there would need to be something in order to have that temporary residency applicable.
If you have uh, a rental property, purely rental property, but you're living in the U.S. and you want residency, you still have to meet the medical insurance requirements in order to obtain the residency status, temporary residency status. And
Right,
of course, there is tax on the rental income that you would derive from that property in addition.
right. But what if it's not a rental? What if it's just a second home? If you don't rent it?
If it's just a second, if it's just a second home, then of
Yeah,
course there would be no, just the annual property taxes would be payable to the municipality, which are minimal, 0.25
right,
percent of the assessed property value. If you fall under the luxury home tax, which requires an improvement value on the property of around $300,000 or greater, then there's an additional sliding scale tax to pay annually on that property, starting at an additional 0.25%.
right. Understood. Okay. Yeah, so I guess my point was if you have there the social security tax or the medical tax in Costa Rica, that's not going to be applied to your US or foreign income. It's applied to the income in Costa Rica, right?
You're going to have to say that one more time.
The social security, it's called the Caja, right? The
Yes,
Costa
correct. Yes.
Rican social security. It's applied to the income you earn in Costa Rica. So like in my example, if you're working in the US, but you have a second home in Costa Rica, there's really no income that the Caja would be subject to. Like no social tax if there's no income in Costa Rica. Am I thinking about that right, or is that not right?
The income that the Caja looks at is your income from the foreign source. In other words,
Right.
your income in the U.S. is what would govern the payments to the Caja.
Oh, so I'm wrong. So they do look at your U.S. income. They're
Yeah,
not just looking
yeah,
at the.
because no, because under the temporary residency status, of course, you're not allowed to work for wages, salary, or commission income, and uh, certainly uh, there
Right.
would
That
be
makes
minimal.
sense.
There would be minimal income except the rental income you would get if you were renting the property. But
Right.
what they would be interested in, what the Caja would be interested in, would be your U.S. income to base the monthly payments on.
Gotcha. Okay. Understood. So it sounds like Costa Rica gives a lot of options for people to get there, for foreigners to get there and get residency and move pretty quickly relative to a lot of places into a permanent resident category, through a different variety of options. Um, yeah.
Yes, in particular, the pensionado and rentista temporary residency categories are quite quick to obtain once all of the documentation is in order and various financial components have been satisfied. From the application date with immigration to actually receiving the resolution granting the residency status, it's usually around 4 months. The inversionista, the property purchase or business interest purchase, takes significantly longer
Okay.
because all of the documentation has to be presented personally by the applicant's lawyer at the immigration department by appointment. And usually that application takes between 16 to 18 months to complete. The,
Yeah.
the other two applications are all done online with a immigration application platform called Tramadija, and all the documentation is uploaded online, so it can be dealt with in a much more expeditious way.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Well, hey Rick, this is really good information. A lot of stuff out there. I would certainly recommend anybody to who's interested in moving to Costa Rica get in touch with Rick, and he can help you through this process for sure and find out which is the best route for you. Um, but yeah, Rick, last question. If you had, do you have any advice for Americans in particular, that would be looking to move to Costa Rica? If there's one thing or one pitfall that you see people to fall in that they fall into, what would you say?
I think the one piece of advice that sticks out in my mind, having lived here for 26 years, is that you have to be aware of the social compromises that you're going to have to accept between a U.S. Canadian society, which is essentially based on British principles originally,
Mhm.
the English common law system, and the Costa Rica society, which is a Latin society, different legal system, as I mentioned at the outset, civil law system, and based on the laws predominantly in Spain.
Right.
There are significant social differences and compromises that really have to be appreciated. Most people concentrate on the things that we've been discussing, the material requirements to make the move, what's necessary for residency, what's necessary to buy a property,
Right.
all of the logistics of the physical part of moving, say, from the US or Canada to Costa Rica. But they, in many cases, won't appreciate the fact that the two societies, so Costa Rica and either Canadian US societies, are quite different in many respects.
Yeah.
And many people are, after a period of time, decide that maybe they don't like the compromises they're being forced to make and pull up roots and go back to their home country. So that's something to be aware of. Obviously, it didn't happen in my case, but
Right.
there are
Yeah.
people that fit that category, and you have to be open-minded and really understand that you are moving to a country with a different society.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, make sure it's a good cultural fit at the end of the day. And sometimes it's hard to figure that out on one vacation, you know? so, so maybe spend a little time in Costa Rica, make sure it's a good cultural fit for where you want to be. Um, but yeah, definitely. That's great advice. And I appreciate it, Rick. This is great information. Please reach out to him. I'll leave his contact information in the show notes so everybody has that. And of course, you can reach out to me as well with U.S. tax advice. But anyway, have a great rest of your day, Rick. I appreciate it, and have a great weekend. So that was a great conversation with Rick Philps, who is an expert in the Costa Rican immigration side, obviously, and he knows a lot about the different options that are out there. As with anything, you got to figure out what is the best route for you based on your facts and circumstances. But I think the point with Costa Rica is that they really try to make it so there's an option for just about anybody, whether you're an investor, whether you're self-employed, whether you're retired and trying to move there, there's an option for you. So, like you said, if it's a good cultural fit, if you love the country, um, you know, there are different options for you to get residency there and permanent residency. And yeah, so reach out to Rick for sure if you have questions. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you need any help with your U.S. tax and international tax questions, you know how to reach me. Thanks a lot for joining, and see you next time.